I hope that the state stuff doesn't take that long.
Yeah, me too.
That's why I'm going to just give like a super high level overview, and hopefully it shouldn't take more than like 10 minutes or 15.
35 minutes later.
Yeah, I know.
Hello, it is Friday, April 8th, 2016, and this is episode 11 of Due for a Win, the Atlantic City and Casino Biz podcast. My name is Craig Stone. With me on the other end of the line is Kyle Askin.
Howdy.
We have lots of stuff to talk about, starting with something that's been a very, very much an ongoing topic, the takeover / pilot bill / AC shutdown that, you know, we talked about as very much was going to happen tonight. The city was going to shut down City Hall through May 2nd. Do you have an update for us on that, Kyle?
Right. So, like you said, the last time that we talked about it 2 weeks ago, the plan was that the government of Atlantic City was going to shut down effective today, basically. Today was going to be the last day of work, and they were going to reopen on May 2nd. So that isn't going to happen because what the Atlantic City Council did was unanimously pass a bill changing basically the number or the time between paychecks from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. So the next time that people are going to get a paycheck is going to be May the 6th. But everyone will continue working during that downtime. So the bit of drama that was happening today around this was that Chris Christie sued to try to prevent this payment earlier in the day, or actually a couple days ago, basically, or he got his education director to sue, or whatever that position is called in the New Jersey state government, just because the city of Atlantic City is in such dire straits that if they make these payroll payments to their employees, the claim was that they might not have enough money either this month or in a future month to make a required payment to the local school board. And today the judge ruled on it. It was actually after the payroll got made, so it didn't even matter. But the judge ruled on it and rejected it outright and had a bunch of not very nice things to say about trying to basically take away these people's paychecks today who make, $20,000 or $25,000 a year. So that's what happened there. While this has all been happening, as I mentioned, the takeover has been stalled since the last time we talked. I mean, I mentioned it was stalled the last time we talked, and it's still stalled. Vincent Prieto still refuses to put out the Christie-Sweeney bill in the Assembly. And instead, yesterday, he has proposed a new bill, which basically creates a 5-person council or planning committee that would basically run or kind of set benchmarks for the city of Atlantic City. And only if the benchmarks aren't met for the first year, then things can start happening, like the water authority gets sold or Baker Field gets sold or whatever. And then if it's for 2 years in a row the benchmarks aren't met, only then can the collective bargaining agreements with the union or the public sector union contracts be broken. It also removed the casino opt-out, which I think we talked about quite a bit last time. It's not something that I care about either way, because I think that if there's North Jersey casinos, a lot of casinos are going to shut down, and actually having the opt-out might be a good thing, because it might help casinos stay open a little bit longer than they would otherwise. The third thing that sort of has happened, that has been happening, is that there's just been kind of a general worsening of the relationship between Christie and Prieto, Christie and Don Guardian, Prieto and Steve Sweeney, and it's basically sort of degenerated into a lot of name calling over the last week, and I don't think there's too much of a reason to get into too much of that, but what did I miss, Greg? What do you want to talk about specifically in all that?
So I think, first of all, my understanding, and I don't know if this has changed, was that the judge in the school lawsuit basically said he wasn't going to rule until April 19th, which is the same thing as ruling against them. Because, like, he did have those negative things to say. He said, like, politics is basically playing into this, and he didn't see the sort of real application of the suit, I think. But I think he basically just punted, which is the same thing as ruling against it, effectively, because by the time that it comes around, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think he made it pretty clear, though, from all of his comments that he was not in favor. And even, I mean, something that he mentioned that he also got the state of New Jersey lawyer to agree to is that it's actually illegal for them to not pay their employees, so I don't even know what they're trying to accomplish from this.
Right, and the funny thing to me was that the city's Board of Education was not on board with the suit. And, you know, they're the ones who are affected by this alleged lack of ability to pay. During the Ask the Mayor segment on WPG, the mayor actually had the Board of Education president on, and the Board of Education president was kind of interesting because he was saying, like, well, you know, yeah, it's late, the payments are late, but the payments have been late for the last, like, 5 mayors. So this is not really that different, and really, you know, I've been more in touch with Guardian than any of the previous mayors, and you know, basically said everything's as fine as it normally is. You know, he didn't sound like he was saying everything was great, but he definitely did not sort of seem to back the state's actions. And then nobody from the Board of Ed showed up at the suit. And that was something that the city was sure to point out. Their lawyers were like, well, you notice that, you know, the Board of Ed in the city that is sort of the entity that should be pushing for this suit if there's a suit necessary, is not here at all and is not represented. So that was interesting, and listening to that on WPG was interesting. One other thing that I just want to talk about is the mudslinging that's happened, if only because it's kind of been interesting and sometimes infuriating, and sort of the fact-checking on it has been interesting. And if you follow Amy S. Rosenberg on Twitter and Christian Hedrick on Twitter, I feel like such a journalism wonk lately because I'm like listening to these press conferences and rooting for them as they ask these tough questions, and then it's just funny to see the way that people respond in the different ways that Christie and Guardian respond, and I'll just kind of leave it at that and let people draw their own conclusions, and you can read Amy Rosenberg and Christian Hedrick's Twitter accounts if you want to know the details about that, because, you know, it got a little nasty at times at at one of the press conferences, but...
So I think just something quick I want to say, and, you know, as a meta point, you can edit this out if you want to, but you know, my general impression has been over the last couple weeks, just from following it, that I'm beginning to think that maybe Prieto and Guardian do have the power, and maybe that their side has the upper hand in the bargaining with Christie and Sweeney. But I think a lot of that impression that I have is just because of when I listen to Don Guardian talk to the press versus when I listen to Chris Christie talk to the press, because, you know, Chris Christie has been very snippy and has made a lot of comments that made it seem like bankruptcy maybe in the offing, or that he's not going to get his way. But I think that part of that probably is just their personalities are so wildly different and how they handle the press, and it may not actually mean anything.
Yeah, and I do wonder, and this is such a journalism sort of dork thing to say, but I do wonder if Christie's handling of the press in press conferences has really worn thin on the people who are on the state beat. And so the questions that he gets asked are even more poignant and pointed and kind of have an edge to them, because people are just sort of tired of the way that he responds or doesn't respond or dismisses angrily the questions that he gets asked. But that's you know, there could be a whole journalism class on that kind of stuff. But speaking of those press conferences, there was a March 31st press conference in Trenton where Christie basically said, if Prieto successfully blocks this payment in lieu of taxes bill and the intervention package, Christie will actively oppose the North Jersey casinos. Basically, and the reason he's saying that is because Prieto is in North Jersey and it's something that, he has supported. And the funny thing about that is, that's exactly what Atlantic City wants. And so that was asked to him in the April 7th press conference that Christie did in Atlantic City was, you said you're not going to back North Jersey casinos. Do you stand by that? And he said yes. And there was sort of this question of, well, don't you realize that that's what people down here want? And he kind of just said, well, that's what I said and I'm sticking with it. We talked a little bit offline about, what would a compromise even look like between the state bill and between the state Senate bill and the Assembly bill. Obviously they're very different. Christie has said he won't sign anything that's different than the Senate bill. Any change, he will not sign it. It's possible that a compromise does happen and, it moves around the benchmarks or it shortens the time period on the benchmarks. I don't know. The Assembly's going to vote on that bill, I think, on Thursday, and so we'll have more detail on the next episode. But, I think you might be right. I think that Prieto and Guardian are sort of seeing that the timeline, which seemed to favor Christie up until now, maybe is sort of shifting against him and that they can actually push him into a compromise as much as he said that he doesn't want to.
Well, what leverage does Christie have? He doesn't really have any, right? The worst thing that happens is Atlantic City declares bankruptcy, which it's a bad outcome, but I think it's a worse outcome for Chris Christie than it is for Don Guardian.
Right.
Because it destroys the credit rating of all of the cities in New Jersey and probably doesn't help the state of New Jersey either.
Yeah, and I think Christie thinks the leverage now is the North Jersey thing, the North Jersey casino referendum.
Right, of course, and that's why he said it, because it hits back at Prieto and it hits back at Stephen Fulop, who Christie suspects is behind everything. It's
crazy. More's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. We don't have a lot. I said, we don't have a lot of answers. It seems like a lot happened, but nothing happened. Nothing got resolved, I'll say, except for that stupid lawsuit that got shut down.
Right. So we'll see what happens 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, and we need some good news, I think. So let's talk about the 2015 operating profit data or operating revenue data that the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement released. And basically it said everyone's making money. Every casino posted a profit. This is from an Associated Press story from Wayne Perry, who we've mentioned many, many times. And it was interesting to see, he really harped on the percentages, which I'd be interested to hear your take on that. So Borgata made $216 million, Harrah's $122 million, which just shows you how much better Borgata does than the second most profitable casino in Atlantic City. Caesars, $83 million, Tropicana, $46 million. Tropicana's revenue was the only one that was down from 2014, so they were actually down 22%. Bally's made 39.9, Golden Nugget made 22.6, Resorts 15.6, and Taj went from a $1.1 million loss in 2014 to a $3.1 million profit. And so one of the things that the article that I'll link to in the show notes really talks about is, Resorts is up 525%. Nugget is up 396%. Bally's is up 77%. And so it led with the percentages and not the amounts. So I'm interested to see, my first thought about this was you, because you're a much more of a math-inclined person than I am.
The Taj is up an infinite amount of percent because they had a loss last year.
Exactly. So does this... just the percentages alone don't really mean that much.
No, they mean nothing. No.
So it's good that they're posting profits. It's good that every casino is profitable. I think that's the main takeaway. That they're all increasing profits in 2015 over 2014. 2014 was when 4 casinos closed, so there was more competition at the start of that, and the money spread over 12 places. So the percentages just don't really seem to mean a whole lot. The total profit, I think, was up also. So that's another,
Right.
it was up 40%. So that is the big headline, is that, you can talk about gaming revenue, and that's sort of what gets talked about all the time, about the gaming revenue's been cut in half since 2007, and that's sort of used as this metric that shows just how bad it is for the city. But the operating profit being up this big shows that they're starting to attract, even while the gaming revenue is stagnant, and I think that's important to mention, shows that they're bringing in probably, club and restaurant spending, and that's something that's really important for the future of the city. So this, to me, I think is pretty good to see. I think it's a little bit of a reason for optimism. Taj only making $3.1 million, like, that's not something to celebrate. I'm not celebrating their infinite percentage gain. And even, resorts making 15.6, like, that number doesn't seem great, right? But, profit is profit, so it's good to see that they're all making money.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on the profits, or any thoughts on these numbers, or how these numbers are sort of being spun as everything's great? Are you not sensing the same optimism, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good. I mean, with the exception of Taj, which is like whatever. All the numbers look fine. I looked into Trop a little more because I was curious of why they got less profitable. They actually made more revenue, but their SG&A cost went like way up this year for reasons that I don't fully understand. But so that was just a thing where they spent a lot more money this year to do something.
So this the selling general and administrative, is that
correct?
So would that include the things like the renovations that obviously they're pumping a bunch of money into?
No, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look more into it. I'd have to sort of go back and put my MBA hat on again and sort of remember how to do accounting. But I looked through the Trop statements a bit, and I don't think that the renovations played a huge role in it. I was wondering if they were doing some financial stuff, like if they did something like a sale and leaseback, but I couldn't really see any evidence of that. So I don't know. It's not something that worries me. I mean, the only one that I look at this and I'm like, it's not so good is the Taj. But as we've talked about many times in the past, it's honestly, it's not even like a real casino. It's just a zombie that for some reason is still alive.
The Taj?
Yes.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's been going out of business or not for, a year and a half now or 2 years now. So
and $3 million of profit is,
it's
that can get wiped out in 2 high rollers come in and have a great weekend, right? So that's sort of within the margin of, not the margin of error, but certainly a margin of concern, I'll call it. Like,
right.
If nobody at the Taj is celebrating that they made $3.1 million instead of losing $1.1 million. I mean, obviously it's better than losing $1.1 million, but that swing is entirely reasonable without making any changes, right? Like, that is a swing that you might see just because you had some luck go your way, I think.
Or you had like 5 rulings against the union this year.
Oh, yeah, that'll help too. Yeah, good point. So shifting from casinos that are not doing well to the one that does the best, Borgata, I thought this was a funny note, has done market research that apparently indicates that many people who are at the Borgata do not think that they are in Atlantic City. So this was kind of a footnote in an article on NorthJersey.com, which is the Bergen Record. John Brennan wrote this article, and it was, the main focus of the article was, if North Jersey casinos open, how many casinos will be left in Atlantic City? Like, how many can you expect to still be there? And so it was interesting to sort of read that part of it, but the thing that kind of jumped out to me, and I think it's because Amy Rosenberg tweeted specifically about it, and it just jumped out to me as really weird. Because you mentioned it last episode, you said you don't really see the Borgata as necessarily being in Atlantic City. You know, obviously it's within the boundaries, but it just doesn't feel quite the same as being on the boardwalk. So it's funny that, you know, they did basically this customer survey and found that a lot of people who answered that in the last 12 months they had been at the Borgata also answered that they had not been in Atlantic City in the last 12 months. And so obviously those answers are mutually exclusive, but it's just funny to see the perception of where people see the Borgata. And so it definitely sort of hammers home that idea that people see the boardwalk as Atlantic City and they see the marina properties as something else.
And I think that makes a lot of sense because, in a way, I mean, it's much harder to get off the marina properties than it is off of the boardwalk properties. And honestly, all three marina properties, but especially Borgata and to a slightly lesser extent Harrah's, you know, they have all of the amenities you could ever want or ask for on site. They have great restaurants. They have a, you know, wonderful spa. They have whatever, you know, clubs if that's what you like. So it's all there. And as I've said in previous episodes, I mean, certainly it's very good for Atlantic City that they have these casinos there because it increases their tax base, it employs people. But I don't think it's as good for the local economy than if these casinos were on the boardwalk.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something that I've mentioned. I don't know if I've mentioned it in the show, maybe in one of the first couple episodes, is, you know, they built Borgata and were supposed to build, you know, an MGM. They're supposed to build Le Jardin or whatever it was called, the Steve Wynn Casino. I'm sorry I'm sure I butchered that French pronunciation, but they bought that land for really cheap. It was something that was totally this desolate, sort of unused land that was separated from everything. They had to build a tunnel, the Brigantine connector, I think, to get there, and that was a whole big political fight. And so it really is this separate area. And at the time, it was everybody's making money hand over fist. Let's expand the sort of gambling district and make more money. And what ended up sort of happening was, well, the biggest and baddest casino moved there and pulled people off the boardwalk where most of the casinos are over to that area. And that's, you know, that's not Borgata's fault. And it's, you know, it's not even the state's fault or the city's fault for allowing that to happen. It's just one of those things where in retrospect it's like, oh yeah, that probably had a long-term negative impact. It's just totally retrospect, and it's just, you know, one of those things that happens with the way the economy goes. I don't know if you have anything to add about this weird notion that you're not in Atlantic City when you're at the Borg.
No, I mean, I think we've covered it in past episodes.
So Tropicana has apparently gotten new machines called Royal Derby. And this I found out actually just a couple hours ago because Daryl McEwen, who goes by Mr. AC Casino on Atlantic City Weekly, and who you may also know as the 7 Stars Insider, and his website is 7starsinsider.com, where 7 is spelled out. And that site, I have to say, first of all, is very useful if you're interested in room information, especially about the Harrah's, Caesars. I don't know why I still call it Harrah's, but the Caesars Entertainment properties. It's one of the few places that has any kind of detail on that. But he posted about Tropicana getting Royal Derby, which is an electromechanical horse racing game where you bet on these little plastic horses, and there are 10 player terminals that give you information on all the horses. It's basically like getting the sheet that you get when you go to the horse track. It tells you their strengths and weaknesses, their past performance, and you basically put money on the winner or on the trifecta, 1, 2, 3, and you get paid out based on how the little horses run around the track, which I'm assuming is some sort of random number generator based on their odds. And so they have a new machine just outside of the 10 North Lounge, which is in the North Tower Casino floor. That's kind of the main table gaming area where all the, craps tables and blackjack tables are. So Royal Derby is a descendant of Sigma Derby, which was a 1985 machine that anybody who is a 500 by Midnight listener or who has attended the Vegas Internet Mafia family picnic will know as something that is available at the D in downtown Las Vegas. The VIMP event hosts a Sigma Derby tournament at the D. There's also a machine at MGM Grand, but this new version of it was introduced at the G2E Gaming Conference in Vegas in 2015, and this is one of the first instances of it that I've heard of actually being deployed. And so I've never played the original Sigma Derby, and it just seems really funny to me. And so I'm actually, pretty excited about this. I definitely want to go to Tropicana. I know we said we didn't have the greatest time at Tropicana on our last trip, but I really want to check this thing out. I want to go and see the horses and hear the stupid electronic sounds they make and just sit around. And apparently it's just this great time where everybody's sitting around and cheering on their horses, especially if you've got multiple people playing. So I'm pumped for it, but I don't know if you share my enthusiasm for little plastic horses going around a track.
I think it would be fun, but so I have a question for you. So, and you might not know this, but how does this work? Is it totally random, or how much randomness is there?
I'm assuming the horses are given odds, and the randomness is based on those odds.
Yeah, it makes sense.
With some, cut, obviously, for sort of the house take. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that the house edge is high. I don't have any sort of data to back that up, but I've heard that it's not a particularly good game for the player.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, I just went to the local horse track actually a week ago today, and I know the house edge for horse racing is also very high. So why not make the electric version the same?
Yeah, but I just want to see it. Because I've seen the videos through VIMP and seen it talked about and heard it talked about, and it seems like it's just universally beloved among that community. And so I want to see it, and I'm excited that it's in Atlantic City and they have one, and we can go see it without having to fly out west and probably even go downtown to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
So one thing that we've been putting off talking about for at least 3 episodes now is conventions. So, and not, work conventions, not medical conventions, but conventions that if you are a nerd of a certain persuasion, which I am a nerd of both of these persuasions at times, you can go and have yourself a nerdy time in Atlantic City. And that's not to judge anyone, because like I said, I've been to baseball card conventions, and I have not been to comic book conventions, but would not be averse to going. So first of all, the AC Boardwalk Con, or ACBC, as it is known, their website is doacbc.com. That is May 13th to 15th at the Convention Center, so it's a little over a month away. The guest list, I have to say, is not the most inspiring. I thought it was more interesting last year. So the guests that they've added just recently are Edward James Olmos, the actor, Giancarlo Esposito, who is currently the Magic Mirror on Once Upon a Time. He was in Breaking Bad. He was Mike Giardello in Homicide: Life on the Street, which, you're from Maryland. You watched Homicide, right? And The Wire and all that stuff?
I watched The Wire. I did not watch Homicide.
I'm the opposite. I've never seen The Wire, but I watched Homicide.
Really?
Yeah.
It's good.
So R.J. Mitt, who is Walter White Jr. from Breaking Bad, Teddy Sears, who is a throwback Flash in the Flash TV series, Drea De Matteo from The Sopranos, Taryn Manning from Orange is the New Black. So, none of these people are comic book related except for, the Flash TV series is obviously comic book related. But one thing I'm wondering is, are these things booked late in advance? I've never late towards the event, because I've never been to a Comic-Con, and so I don't know if these schedules are not set until a couple weeks ahead of time. And I know there's a whole, culture of people who just do a Comic-Con circuit, basically. If you're a comic book creator like the guys on the show Comic Book Men that's on not after Walking Dead, but after the show that's on after Walking Dead that just talks about The Walking Dead. Those guys basically just go to Comic Cons, like 40 weekends a year or something crazy. So I don't know if those people get added later or what, but, what do I know? If you're interested in checking it out, it's doacbc.com.
Yeah, so, I'm also not, you know way more about comic books than I do. I have been to a PAX. I went to PAX East in 2011 or 2012 in Boston, which for those of you who don't know is the Penny Arcade Expo, which is a popular webcomic. I would characterize it as more or less, it's a bit more of a gaming convention than a comic convention per se. There's, because just of the subject matter of Penny Arcade is very gaming based. I haven't read it in a few years, but I don't necessarily know the most about this, though I know a little bit. But I think you can go one of two ways as one of these conventions. You can have a great guest list and try to get people that way, or you can kind of be well known and just build up a reputation for yourself. And if you do that, then you don't really necessarily need the guests. So I'm not sure if this Do ACBC has reached that point, or maybe the organizers are well known and that's good enough.
So this is only the second year of the AC Boardwalk Con, but one thing I'll say about it is, for me personally, I don't care about, waiting in an autograph line. I'd be interested in seeing really good panels, if they have good panels. People talking about, a show I'm interested in or a comic book I'm interested in. But you're right. It's really more about sort of the crazy experience of you've got a bunch of people in, dressed up as superheroes and people go totally all out. And so that's really what it's about, going and seeing and maybe seeing new creators that you haven't heard of. So, hopefully it totally knocks that out of the park and it's actually totally worthwhile and keeps doing well. So another big convention that always has a great guest list and autographed list is the 37th Annual National Sports Collectors Convention. Is going to be in Atlantic City August 3rd through 7th. It is a big, big show. So I went when it was in Baltimore just because, I think Bill Simmons had written a really long article with a ton of pictures about it, and I was sort of had recently gotten back into buying some baseball cards and some memorabilia, which I've sort of phased out and moved more to the comic book side. The key takeaway here is just that I'm a huge nerd, but it was an interesting experience. It's just a massive, massive event of every sports memorabilia item you can imagine. I got a pretty cool University of Maryland pennant from, I think it was the 50s or 60s. Anyways, the National Sports Collectors Convention, it's the biggest event in sports memorabilia every year. And so it's cool that it's coming to Atlantic City. Again, it's going to be at the convention center, and the autograph guests are, the biggest Hall of Famer names: Wade Boggs, Johnny Bench, Rickey Henderson, Reggie Jackson, Roger Clemens, Darryl Strawberry, Cal Ripken Jr., who obviously, for us is two guys from Maryland, so that's the name. Ozzie Smith, Mariano Rivera, Joe Namath, Lawrence Taylor, Joe Theismann, Patrick Ewing. So it's just all sports and absolutely the biggest names. You have to pay for autograph tickets, basically, and the tickets are not cheap. There are times when you can actually just go buy an autograph on eBay for cheaper than the autograph ticket. But, if you want to go and sort of have the experience of actually getting something signed by someone in person, this is a good way to do it. And it's probably just going to be a really interesting spectacle and just crazy to see how many people come out for this thing, because it's a huge event every year. So I don't know what the prices are for this convention for the autograph listings. Those will be added later, but something to keep an eye on if you're interested in sports memorabilia. If you have your eye on that, random bowl game from 1975 pennant, or something that's just going to complete your man cave. This is a sure way to go find it.
Yep, and this is definitely a good get for Atlantic City. National is the big sports convention every year. It's the best and most well-known convention in this sort of genre of conventions. So
one thing that actually we mentioned on the last podcast was new retail development next to Boardwalk Hall. And it's basically this big, very long brick facade building. And we were sort of hopefully speculating that it might be a brewery, just because it sort of looked like that on the insides. There are lots of exposed brick. We, just speculated rather than actually going and doing any of the research. But it's retail. It's just a plain old retail sort of boardwalk-facing center. And so this area used to be the Trump World's Fair and the Playboy Club that got knocked down years and years and years ago. And so BET Investments, which is Bruce Toll, who actually recently stepped down from the Toll Brothers family, is opening 16,000 square feet of retail space. It's right on the boardwalk. They're hoping it would be done by spring 2015, and when you go to their site, it still says opening spring 2015. So that clearly didn't happen. And there's really not much recent news about it. There have been no tenants announced. There's no opening date, although it would certainly seem that, Labor Day or Memorial Day 2016 would make a lot of sense, because basically the structure's done, it looks like. Bruce Toll has actually owned this land since he outbid Donald Trump for it in 2005, so, certainly in the height of things in Atlantic City. He purchased it for $25.15 million. In 2011, he paid even more to lift the deed restriction so that it could be used as a casino. So in 2011, he seemed to be indicating that he would want to use it as a casino. And then now, in I think 2013, he announced he was going to do retail development, and now here we are, or 2014, and now here we are actually getting towards opening. So it looks close to done. The CRDA posted a Vine in October showing it basically complete and looking ready for tenants. But if it was going to open in May, I would have thought that we would have heard who the tenants were going to be. So we haven't heard any of that. And back when it was announced, there was talk that there are restaurants interested and that kind of stuff. But there's been no confirmation. So I don't know. It's kind of weird that we're now a month and a half away from Memorial Day and we have not heard anything about this.
I mean, I would say that if we haven't heard anything yet, it's probably not going to open this year. It's probably just, they might not have the tenants necessary, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You'd think that... maybe they're sticking to their guns on the rent they want, and, they don't have enough people that are willing to pay it, and... Yeah, they've sunk $30.65 million into this thing before they even, put a shovel in the ground. So maybe they feel like they need to recoup some investment, because for that price you could have bought Trump Plaza. Yeah, you can just, I don't know. Maybe in a couple of years it'll just be t-shirt shops and massage parlors and like a head shop or something. So the funny thing... Like the rest of the boardwalk. The funny thing is they're adamant that it's not going to be that style of stuff. It seems like they're hoping it's going to be more like, national restaurant chains, I think was the rumor. But so, I'm thinking they are hoping that it's going to be, Abercrombie and like Cheesecake Factory and stuff like that. Exactly. So I don't know if that's going to happen. And I don't know, is it worse to open with 1,600 square feet where you've got however many 16 storefronts and only 3 of them are open? I'm guessing that they would rather not do that, and they're going to wait to fill the thing out, because it's not going to look great if this big retail sort of frontage is there and you've only got 3 stores in it. That's kind of a turnoff. So who knows? We'll keep an eye out for more news, but not much information on that. All right. So since it seems like we have a little bit of time, I feel like that gives us carte blanche to talk about whatever we want. So, we mentioned last time that we thought, maybe it's going to be a brewery. That might be kind of cool. And we had talked about, it might be neat. And you mentioned that something that I want drinking on the boardwalk. And I don't know, maybe we can take this time and talk about... So what do you think, Craig? What do you think Atlantic City needs to be relevant in the future.
So,
like, well, first, let's even take a step back. Like, what do you think Atlantic City's goal should be? Like, how should they define success? How should they define relevance? And then what do you think they need to do that?
Wow, that's a macro level question.
I know.
So I think, obviously, like I said earlier, the gaming revenue has been such the core metric for them for a long time. And I think shifting to other forms of revenue and sort of focusing on those other forms of revenue, whether they're at casinos or they're built, like the Polar Coaster or bars or this retail space, those metrics are going to be much more interesting. Much more important. So to me, the measure of success is going to be, not having a bunch of closed stuff on the boardwalk. Like, the old Atlantic Club can't be sitting there closed. And, filling those spaces and sort of getting them open as something that is attractive and different and not sort of just the status quo of, well, we're going to open a casino and we're really going to hope that this time it's better and this time it's different, rather than having a real plan. And not just that, rather than having a plan that is just taking money away from the other competitors in Atlantic City. And I think that's been part of the problem that I mentioned last episode is so much of the plan has been, how do we get money from our existing customers? How do we take customers away from the guy next door? So I think a big measure of success is going to be somebody coming in, or multiple people coming in and investing in these properties in a way that is not just keeping the gaming revenue flat. I want to see stuff that is so sort of different and grand and unique that number starts to go up, and also the non-gaming revenue goes up even more. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but...
Right. So, what I think Atlantic City should be doing, and where I think there's kind of an opening in the market is, so a lot of what I think Don Guardian and the other people in Atlantic City are trying to do is that they're trying to obviously diversify from gaming, which I think probably everyone unanimously agrees is a good idea at this point. It's obvious that gaming, has exploded around the East Coast, and it's only going to continue to expand into other states and nearby jurisdictions and maybe North Jersey. But what Don Guardian's trying to do and other people in Atlantic City is, I think they're trying to bring in as much other industry, sort of non-tourism related industry as possible to try to sort of help the general economic malaise that Atlantic City's been in. I mean, it has the highest bankruptcy rate in the country and things like that. But when I look at Atlantic City and I think about its history as this, has this rich history as a resort town, or maybe not a resort town, but as a, vacation town, as basically their main industry has always been tourism. I think that's what they should continue to push, and something that, I've said a couple times, or you've indicated that I think part of that could be something like allowing drinking on the boardwalk, and maybe only on the boardwalk, maybe in one or two other spots. But and even if it's like New Orleans, maybe you have to pour your beer into a cup before you leave, and things like that are fine. But I just think that, there's so much untapped potential if you look at the number of people who from the East Coast, who from Europe are flying, out to Las Vegas or are flying to a place like New Orleans, when Atlantic City is right there and it's so much closer, and it could be, so different than anything else on the East Coast. I think that's it's a tremendous opportunity, and it's something that we've talked about in past episodes. You've mentioned that when you're sitting on the Greyhound coming down to Atlantic City with these obviously foreign tourists, and you're like, I don't know if they really are going to get what they're expecting. I mean, there's no reason that Atlantic City can't be this sort of weird and sort of wild place with a lot of cool stuff instead of, what it is now, which is kind of a dilapidated and rundown beach city, essentially. And, a big reason that I tend to think that the city council of Atlantic City, or a reason that I'd prefer that the city council and the local government of Atlantic City stays in control of Atlantic City, is I think that sort of any solutions for Atlantic City to really boom again would have to be nuanced, and I don't know if the state, or I don't know if that can happen under state oversight. I mean, I think they'll be trying to make micro changes to fix things, when I think maybe it's a macro change is what's needed.
So one thing that I think you really hit on, two things. Weird, I've thought about a lot. The word weird, you go to Austin and it's keep Austin weird. And,
right.
And Atlantic City, I think, just maybe needs to be kind of weirder. And I think the reason that word resonates is because weird doesn't need $100 million investments to happen. Weird can sort of happen in terms of sort of weird, quirky places that are interesting. Like, for example, Austin, there was a place when we had a friend who went to grad school in Austin, and every time I went there, he made sure that we went to this bar that was a hell-themed bar that had the best burgers in Austin. And, it's just this weird, just complete dive that has, like, random videos, like kung fu videos on the screen, and just all the walls are red with, like, flames, and the music is, death metal and really dark stuff. And that place was great in just the weirdest way. And, Atlantic City could get more of that. Another thing is, I think it was Marty Small who said, the AC council president, who was talking about when the state first talked about helping out Atlantic City, now 5 or 6 years ago, they talked about how they were going to bring all this tourism in, and the CDRDA was going to make all this stuff happen. And one of the things that they talked about was, like New Orleans you mentioned, is bringing sort of Bourbon Street to New Orleans, and he said, where is my Bourbon Street on whatever, Pacific Ave or whatever he said. And that really struck me, because it was like, why isn't it like that? Like, why don't they just open a bunch of bars and close it off to traffic and sort of create things that incentivize people to open things there and just make it an awesome time? I mean, that's obviously easier said than done, but those kind of things I think would go a long way to making it sort of this party place and not just this place where you go to sit at a slot machine and gamble and then get on the bus and go back home. So that kind of sort of bigger shift in the idea of Atlantic City, I think, would go a long way.
Right, and I think we've kind of danced around this, both in what you said earlier as a response to my question and in previous episodes, is I think, as you pointed out, the big difference between Atlantic City and a place like Las Vegas is that in Atlantic City, everyone's trying to increase their share of the pie, and no one's really building anything that makes Atlantic City as a whole better. No one's trying to make the actual pie bigger. And I think that it wouldn't be that hard of a thing to do. And I'm sure that there's a lot of obstacles, when I ask, why isn't drinking allowed on the boardwalk or somewhere else in Atlantic City, for example? I mean, for all I know, there's probably some state law that frankly might not allow it, no matter what Atlantic City says. So, I mean, there could be a lot of obstacles, but I think everyone's been sort of selfishly looking out for themselves for the last 30 years or 40 years, and not looking out and not trying to increase, Atlantic City as a whole.
So you have, though, now Glenn Straub and Bart Blatstein. Do they give you any optimism that they are going to make or push that change? Because those are two people who are not traditionally casino operators.
Right.
And they're unique in that they're not heading up a big corporation, or they're not, like Carl Icahn bought Tropicana and Trump Taj kind of just as, totally as an investment, as what can we do on the margins here? So these guys have an opportunity to shape the future of Atlantic City and the future of the way we see Atlantic City, and I don't really know exactly what their visions are, although it seems pretty clear that Blatstein's vision is very nightclub-centric. But, do they give you optimism, or at this point have you seen enough or from Blatstein and sort of heard enough from Straub but not seen enough that any optimism that you might have had is sapped away?
So, obviously we've talked a lot about Glenn Straub. He's a very strange man. We're both sort of nervous about what he's planning for Revel. Bart Blatstein, as you brought up a couple episodes ago, has some amount of history of not sort of finishing what he started. But I'd say as a whole, I actually am optimistic about Atlantic City, despite everything we've talked about, despite, who knows if there's going to be gaming in North Jersey, who knows if a couple more casinos are going to close down. But, I think part of the reason I'm optimistic is simply because, this state of Atlantic City, right this second, is so bad, it's almost impossible to imagine it getting worse at this point. But to me, it doesn't... I think that the investment that's going on there, whether it's by people like Straub or Blatstein or not, I think that bodes well for the future, and personally I am optimistic.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I go back and forth. At times I think, they could really knock it out of the park and do something that is out there and different and weird, to go back to that word, and sort of make things a big enough attraction that people come not just for the gaming. But on the other side of that, it was I was really excited for the playground and for T Street, and I thought the idea behind the T Street was great, and then we saw the execution, and it was just piss poor. So that makes me much more skeptical. And then, same thing with Straub. The ideas were very grand, and I didn't agree with most of them. I didn't think most of them were even good ideas, but they were very out there and different. And then the result, or at least what he's talking about making it now, is a water park that everybody who has bought or hinted at buying any of the closed properties has said, oh, we're going to do a water park like they have in Poconos, and it's still going to be a small casino. It's probably still going to be pretty casino focused at Revel. So I'm sort of tempering my enthusiasm, but I still have that hope. And obviously we do an Atlantic City podcast, so we're optimists. We're optimists. I feel like, if we weren't optimistic, we wouldn't be doing this every 2 weeks. We'd just say, well, the place is screwed, so so let's just cut this out. Let's save ourselves some time.
But can you imagine a world where instead of the boardwalk being full of t-shirt shops and head shops and massage parlors, it's full of bars and breweries and places like that, and on a cool summer night with a breeze, you can walk down the boardwalk with a beer after, leaving a brewery or whatever and head back to your casino hotel. And, I don't know. Honestly, people have always said that Atlantic City has advantages over Las Vegas and that the ocean's there, and that's not something that Las Vegas can ever compete with. And I think in the right circumstances, people are right. It's just, it hasn't happened for a lot of reasons. Instead, right now it'd be you're walking down the boardwalk by yourself, and maybe some of the rickshaw pushers and passing closed storefronts and, fortune tellers and massage parlors. And close, you're right.
Yeah.
The ingredients, I feel like it's just not that far away from having this amazing experience for people who want to come to the city and have a great time, but yet it seems really far away simultaneously.
That, I think, sums it up perfectly, is that at some point, I just have to feel like somebody's going to put it together. And they're going to figure it out, and the boardwalk's going to be great, and people are going to start to go. It's never going to be the Vegas Strip. It's just not going to happen. But it will be an attraction in and of itself, and the fact that it does worse than other New Jersey beach towns that are big attractions is insane, right? So,
I mean, and not only that, but Atlantic City, perhaps, a lot of its press recently has been bad press, but still, it's known almost worldwide. I mean, there's been, Boardwalk Empire is like a famous show on HBO now that millions of people watch around the world, honestly. And there's just so much history there, and it's been part of so many movies, and, there's a lot of notoriety for it already. It seems like it should be well positioned to move into a future like the one I described.
Yeah, and I say that it does worse than other...
And instead, it gets killed by Wildwood and places like that.
And I say it does worse than those towns, except it did bring in over $2 billion in gambling revenue last year. So I'm going to guess that you could add up everything that Wildwood brought money in from, and it's not $2 billion. It's just that such a huge cut of that goes to other things. So, yeah, I think those are things to think about. I think you have made a lot of good points and sort of sum up why we have the feelings that we have for Atlantic City and the hope that we have for the future of Atlantic City. I think that's probably a good way to end episode 11 here, unless you have anything else you want to get in.
Nope, I agree.
So I just want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you to everyone who has posted or joined the Facebook group. That is at facebook.com/groups/DoForAWin. It's a great place to go discuss anything Atlantic City related, your trips, your gambling, your restaurant plans. It's gotten some good activity, so that's been really cool to see. Obviously, our site is DoForAWin.com. There you can find our episodes with the show notes that have links to all of the various articles. You can find us on iTunes by searching Do For A Win or Atlantic City. You can also find us on Twitter at Do For A Win. Feel free to reach out to us at any of those venues. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at doforawin@gmail.com if you'd like it to be just between us rather than to the whole Facebook group. But again, we love to hear from everybody. We're really happy to see all the activity and to see everybody reaching out. So until 2 weeks from now, thanks for listening, and good luck in your gambling adventures.
Talk to you all in a couple weeks. We were sort of looking like we were going to be only news this episode. And I'm like, no, we can't have that.